Hello. This webinar will look at the approaches to adaptations for early years educator and early years practitioner qualifications. We have previously confirmed that the knowledge-only version of the early years educator and early years practitioner qualifications will remain as an option this year to support and enable learners to progress to further or higher education. We're pleased to share with you that this option is now available, becoming available from the 4th of April 2022. Process-related frequently asked questions can be accessed from the website, and a link has been provided at the end of the PowerPoint slides. The Certificate of Achievement displays the same qualification reference number, QRN, and title of the original qualification undertaken, with knowledge-only pathway clearly identified. This is to distinguish between knowledge-only achievement and early years educator or early years practitioner competence for employment in the adult-to-child ratios in early years settings. Learners who wish to gain the DFE skills criteria at a later date will be able to do so. They will also be able to continue to gain access to UCAS tariff points as appropriate, and centres can continue to draw down funding in the usual way. Throughout this webinar, we will consider the available adaptations, remind ourselves of the risk-rated approach, remind ourselves of the qualifications that are relevant to these adaptations, consider longitudinal studies and the qualifications where that is relevant, and of course, how to map this criteria from the risk-rated approach in your normal ways of working, as well as looking at those options again for learners progressing to further or higher education. So the adaptations that are available for the early years educator and the early years practitioner qualifications follow a risk-rated approach. This means that anything that is listed as amber on the risk-rated approach that you can find on the qualification pages needs to be seen by an occupationally competent member of staff. That can be the assessor from your provider, or it can be the placement supervisor who is occupationally competent and able to make these decisions confidently. Where it's been a witness testimony, it's important that triangulation of methods are used and applied to ensure that the assessor at your provider, at your centre, is happy with that judgment and that competence being signed off as met. So the risk-rated approach, just to remind you, and those providers that have been using a risk-rated approach previously will be familiar with this. It's a document that's been created from collaborative work and approved by the Department for Education. The Department for Education, the DFE, Early Years Educator and Early Years Practitioner criteria have been risk-rated to maximise and optimise the learner's opportunities within the real work environment. The key provided within this document that you will find on the qual pages will guide your assessor when learners are in placement, and that risk-rated approach should be referred to and will help to inform planning and assessment. The centre must ensure that all amber risk-rated criteria is observed, either directly by assessor observation or via expert witness testimony. And planning can ensure that these criteria are observed during the placement opportunity that the student is able to access. Learners can prepare for all other criteria in line with the approach suggested on the risk-rated mapping document. This implies that anything that's colour-coded amber must be seen. Anything colour-coded grey can be absorbed by the knowledge that the student has already gained in their internal units. Anything that's coloured green can use and apply a range of different methods. And these, of course, can be student-centred. So which qualifications do these apply to? They apply to all EYE qualifications, so the Level 3 Diploma in Early Years Education and Care and the Level 3 Technical Diploma in Early Years Education and Care. And what you will note there is that external assessment is now back to its normal expectations. There is, of course, an adaptation to the longitudinal study. And please do take some time to look at the adaptation. And this will enable students on this qualification unable to access a placement and therefore unable to complete their longitudinal study in the normal expected way to be able to do so through an adaptation. The Level 3 Diploma for the Early Years Workforce. No external assessment, but the risk-rated approach, the amber, the grey, the green, does apply. And the adaptation to the longitudinal study also is in place. This adaptation should only be used where placement has been interrupted and the collation of observations as part of a longitudinal study has not been possible. Each learner must have knowledge, understanding and skills of the observation cycle when working with babies and young children in line with the statutory early years framework and provide evidence of this as part of previous assessment for Unit 3.14 in order to meet the early years educator criteria. In the light that this can't happen, 4 observations have been externally set, written by NCFE, and your learners may use these observations to complete their evaluation against a newly adapted mark scheme, also available as part of this adaptation. Skills of observation will already have been assessed, and it is the evaluation required within Unit 3.15 that is assessed on this occasion. And this makes this adaptation possible. Learners are still required to complete individual evaluations in line with the requirements of the adapted mark scheme for assessment. The Level 3 Diploma in Childcare and Education. Normal expectations apply to the external assessment and there is no longitudinal study mandated as part of this qualification. The risk-rated approach can be applied to practice portfolios 1 and 2 as part of Unit 8 and Unit 15. The Technical Level 3 Diploma in Childcare and Education. Normal expectations for external assessment are now in place. A longitudinal study is not mandated. Unit 16 can use a risk-rated approach in order to achieve development of skills. Unit 16 must be used to ensure all early years educator criteria is met, and the full claim of Unit 16 must be made despite only partial achievement where a knowledge-only qualification is being claimed for. The Level 2 Diploma for the Early Years Practitioner. The risk-rated approach has been mapped to skills, and this must be used to ensure all early years practitioner criteria is met. And the full claim of units will be possible for that knowledge only, despite partial achievement of skills. So when using the risk-rated approach for any of the qualifications we've mentioned so far, you will be claiming for that qualification in full. Where a student has not been able to meet the risk-rated approach, they've not been able to identify evidence for amber, grey and green criteria as marked in that risk-rated document, then the student has the option to claim a knowledge-only pathway. When you're claiming for a knowledge-only pathway, the processes are exactly the same. You're claiming for the same qualification using the same QRN, but you will be selecting knowledge-only pathway. And there are links at the end of the PowerPoint to take you to that and to take you through it. So what about FE, further education and higher education for our students? NCFE has worked together with Ofqual DFE, Education and Skills Funding Agency, the ESFA, and UCAS to agree how learners can progress to a knowledge-only version of Early Years Educator or Early Years Practitioner qualifications. The Certificate of Achievement will display the same QRN and the same title of the original qualification undertaken, with knowledge-only pathway clearly identified. And that will help employers, and it will also help the student to know what needs to be done and how to gain the skills criteria at a later date should they wish to do so. UCAS have confirmed that learners taking a knowledge-only pathway will continue to gain the respective allocated UCAS tariff points for that qualification as appropriate. ESFA has confirmed continued funding availability. The DFE have also confirmed that their lists of full and relevant qualifications for the Early Years Educator and Early Years Practitioner qualifications have been updated regarding the differentiation between knowledge only and competence to practice, adding clarity for employers. If you have any questions at all, please visit the EYE EYP awarding page, which can be found here, or contact our customer support team. Numbers and access links here. And the early years qualification approach to awarding that has been referred to during this webinar can be seen on that following link, early years qualification approach to awarding NCFE, and the frequently asked questions to help with the processes around knowledge-only options. Thank you very much for listening to this short webinar. As we know, it continues for some of our students to be a very challenging time. Those options during this recovery period from the pandemic remain in place. Option 1, business as usual, continue to complete the qualification in its usual way, no risk-rated approach applied. Option 2, follow a risk-rated approach where there are competencies involved and claim the qualification in full. Option 3, where it has not been possible to complete placement in order to meet the requirements of a risk-rated approach, claim a knowledge-only pathway, but do so by claiming the qualification in full and selecting knowledge-only pathway. I hope this webinar has been useful in refreshing and reminding you of the options available for you and your students moving forward. Please do get in touch if there is anything at all that concerns you about any of the webinar and any of the options for your students moving forward. Take good care and thank you for listening.